A very warm welcome to the launch of a manifesto for education for environmental sustainability. And I think judging from that initial poll, I think we found our audience, people who think that this is both essential and important. This manifesto is the result of the 2021 BERA Research Commission. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to BERA for supporting this work. I'm Linda Dunlop from the University of York, and this is Lizzie Rushton from King's College London. Lizzie, would you like to say hello?
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I don't quite know why I'm in a slightly blue vibe, but we'll go with that as a kind of a watery hope. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Lizzie. So over the past year, Lizzie and I have led the Research Commission together, working with our range of partners who I'll tell you about shortly, as well as experts in environmental education, teachers and young people, and hopefully some of you. The result is the illustrated manifesto that we're launching today, a vision for education for environmental sustainability in the UK. Much work in this area is focused on the interests of either teachers or young people, but the manifesto that we're sharing has brought teachers and young people together through a series of futures and visualization workshops to understand each other and identify shared priority actions for education. And we use environmental sustainability in the way that the teachers and young people who took part in the research defined it. So they talked about sustainability as a process of care and repair of the environment, which involves addressing social and environmental injustices. And they talked about the need to consider future generations as a matter of priority. And it's important, I think, that education for environmental sustainability is not seen as a choice, and teachers and young people alike discuss the need for collective action through education. So the manifesto that Lizzie will present shortly is the product of work that we've done with our amazing partners on this slide. So Cirrus Naeri of Roots hosted provocations from leaders in research and practice on sustainability education, which we use to stimulate thinking in advance of our futures workshops with teachers and young people. Amanda Smith of the Centre for Alternative Technology and Andrea Bullavan and Jackie Airy of Liverpool World Centre co-designed and facilitated the Futures workshops. Jane Essex of the University of Strathclyde and Judy Ling Wong of the Black Environment Network helped to make sure that the manifesto making was inclusive. And Lucy Atkinson, Laura Price, Smriti Safaya, Josh Stubbs, Maria Turkenberg Van Diepen and Lucy Wood supported the commission as research assistants, and Michelle Ryan of the Association for Science Education and Faye Laverick of Huntington School helped us to reach teachers. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So the illustrated manifesto is a result of the analysis of workshop contributions of over 200 young people and teachers. And it's illustrated by Maisie Summer, who's drawn here on the right, and she facilitated the visualization workshops along with Laura Price. The complete manifesto can be downloaded from the BERA website, and the images that Lizzie will share later are all Maisie's work. Next slide, please. So during the event, you're going to hear about the manifesto and also responses to it from our wonderful panel of speakers. We have Molly Hucker, a climate activist from Wales, Lord Jim Knight, a Labour member of the House of Lords and chair of the Centre for Accelerating Social Technology, Judy Ling Wong, who's CEO of the Black Environment Network, who'll speak on inclusive education and environmental sustainability, and Sarah Robertson, who's Director of Education at the Royal Society of Chemistry. And we'll hope that you are able to ask questions and to come along to network after the event. We'll post information about that later. So it's time, I think, for me to hand over to our first contributor, Molly Hucker. So Molly is a climate activist from Wales, and she shared a provocation with us at the start of the year, and we're delighted to have her return now to share her reflections on the current context and the messages in the manifesto. Over to you, Molly.
Thank you, Linda, and I'm so happy to be here tonight. My name's Molly and I'm a climate activist from South Wales, and my activism mainly focuses on accessibility to sustainability and the social justice issues which are obviously interlinked with climate justice. And I think, especially in the run-up to COP, young people can sometimes be used as tokens and tick box exercises to be invited along to events just to show that an organisation is considering young people's views, but there's never actually any follow-up action. And the follow-up action is actually the really important part to make sure people's voices are heard. And I'm so happy to have been involved with this manifesto because I feel as though young people's voices have been incorporated at every level of the production of the manifesto. And I'd like to hear from your voices as well. So I'd like to ask, how do you feel about current climate education? And I'll give you a minute to really reflect on how you feel. And then if you could just pop your thoughts in the word cloud, which is now on your screen. Thank you. Could do better, I like that one. Some positive thinking for ahead. A joke. Depressed, inadequate, inconsistent, not enough. Great, keep them coming in, guys. Alarmed. So we can see inadequate is definitely the main theme. I just allow people a few more seconds to think. Patchy, lacking, inconsistent. Okay, fab. Thank you everyone for adding your words there. And I think there's a clear consensus that the current climate education we're receiving and providing is inadequate. Education should empower people, and instead, current climate education puts the issue into a box by secluding climate education to science. It inadvertently encourages people to forget about the climate emergency and not take action to tackle those who perpetuate the climate emergency. And then for those who do go on to learn more about the climate emergency, it can feel really, really overwhelming. Speaking from my own experience, my sort of climate education was a sort of non-event. I learned about greenhouse gases in chemistry, but it never really went beyond that. And so when I did my own research and found out later on how all-encompassing really the climate emergency is, it was really scary. And I felt so guilty about how my individual actions contribute to the climate emergency. And this led to me really overanalyzing every aspect of my life in terms of the environmental impacts it has. And it also led to me developing climate anxiety, which is quite debilitating when you think about the action that we need to take. If I had received sufficient education that had told me that the climate emergency was a human-made problem caused by systemic exploitations, but there were solutions waiting to be implemented to combat all this, maybe I wouldn't have felt so scared for my future. And lack of understanding breeds fear. If the climate emergency was approached in schools along with the values outlined in the manifesto, such as pragmatism, compassion, and adaptability, I think we'd see a more constructive approach. And then we could see a culture shift beyond ignorance and fear towards processing the climate emergency in a way that looks at what actions we can take and what actions we can demand and the systemic changes that we need to see. So if I could have the next slide, please. And there's a quote there from Nelson Mandela, and I think it really shows the power that education has. And I think this manifesto makes clear the solutions which need to be employed and how these solutions need to come from multiple different places. The manifesto mentions in the classroom, we need to see discussions and openness encouraged, and this will really empower young people to explore this topic and ultimately take their future into their own hands. But it doesn't stop there either. We need to see community solutions. The manifesto rightly highlights how schools are focal points of communities, and through sharing our own experiences and raising each other's voices, communities can facilitate collective action towards sustainability. Now, we've talked about classrooms and communities, but I feel like governments need to be adopting these solutions for themselves as well, because I certainly don't feel that governments make decisions with sustainability as enough of a priority, or that they consider sustainability in every decision concerning finance. I think we're seeing this currently with the Cambo oil field. And the manifesto mentions the need for the sustainable option to be the most convenient option. And this shouldn't just apply to schools either. We need to see this in things like our food system and our energy markets too. I think aspects of this manifesto, which can't be understated, is the need for how sustainability can be incorporated into already existing mechanisms of accountability. And accountability is vital, not just when we think about holding governments to account, but ourselves and the people that we surround ourselves with too. And this is very important for achieving social justice. If we didn't have the current level of accountability that we have now, I think governments and big polluters would be doing even less greenwashing than they currently are. We must always demand better for people and planet and never fall silent on the issues that matter to us most. And we must remember that there cannot be climate justice without social justice. And looking forward, I think this manifesto outlines what I would like to see and what I wish I'd experienced in my education. And later this evening, I'll be travelling to Glasgow for COP. And my main focus there will be to demand better and hold governments to account. In many ways, I feel as though I'll be bearing witness to what lies ahead for our future, the future of humanity and of our planet. Whether or not any meaningful changes will amount from COP is uncertain. But one thing that we do know is that any meaningful changes need to incorporate education. This manifesto shows clearly how schools can really lead the way. If climate conscious habits are cultivated in schools early on, then people will be more likely to understand and expect better for our planet and the one which they will inherit when they're older. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Molly. It's a real humbling privilege to have you join us. Thank you so much for that. So we have another question there on our poll. So if you wouldn't mind, perhaps after Molly's contribution, we feel a little bit more optimistic than we did a few minutes ago, but please do respond to that question. So I think I'm going to attribute the 14% or 12% of us that feel, sorry, 6%, I can't even read the poll, that feel very optimistic to you, Molly. That's the Molly effect there. And hopefully the manifesto over the next few weeks and months will contribute to raising optimism across our community and beyond. So if we move on to the next slide, thank you so much. So we have one more question for you. So who needs to listen to teachers and young people about education for environmental sustainability? We have their voices collected together and so beautifully illustrated by Maisie at Miss Manifesto, but who do we need to get to listen? So loud and clear, our political leaders, our Department for Education, but also exam boards and other key stakeholders there. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Maybe we move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. So really wonderful to be with you today and to share with you the Manifesto, which is a project as you have seen with many, many wonderful partners, including the young people that we've worked with, their teachers, academics and NGOs from across the UK. And we're delighted that so many of you can join us this evening, those of you who've contributed in your various ways. And we've been able to involve partners in different ways at different stages of the project, for example, through providing some of the provocations and preparing for the workshops, and through working with different groups to enable a range of voices to be heard. We were very, very keen that the Manifesto captured perspectives from across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and by working with experts in inclusion of young people with additional learning needs and the Black Environment Network, we've aimed to include the voices of people less frequently heard in the context of education for environmental sustainability. And just to note, prior to the workshops, we were able to gather a series of provocations about education for environmental sustainability. These are short videos and texts that speak to different themes, including young leaders of collective action for the climate, intergenerational conversations about the climate, local and global bridges to an interconnected world, and perspectives from research, teachers and practitioners. So these provocations that have been kindly contributed by the community are all freely available to view and engage with on the Roots Journal website. And we do encourage you to look at these and use them in your own work and thinking going forward. Co-creation is at the heart of the Manifesto project. We as a research team have brought together people and communities with these different ideas and perspectives from varied geographical contexts and across different generations. And the Manifesto represents the visions and conversations of young people and teachers that we've worked with over the past year. The co-production of the Manifesto, as Linda has said, has involved a series of online workshops where we've discussed the barriers, the solutions, and the pathways towards the future we would like for education for environmental sustainability. Through the guidance of our artist partners, we've been able to literally draw the future we would like to see. And I'm now going to highlight some of the ideas, proposals, and suggestions that are presented in the Manifesto. If we can move to the next slide, please. And to the next one, thank you. At the outset of co-creating the Manifesto, we've articulated the values that we share and the capabilities that we need. As Molly has highlighted, some of the values include love for each other and for the planet, respect and compassion for others, honesty, humility and cooperation, social justice, equitable opportunities for all, connection with nature, positivity, adaptability, practicality and pragmatism. Capabilities that we need include critical thinking, questioning, data literacy, research and innovation, creativity, communication, and networking. A key point to note here is that teachers and young people alike see knowledge as necessary but not sufficient for education for environmental sustainability. Throughout the Manifesto, young people and teachers have identified solutions at different levels for the classroom, the school, community, and at policy level. And I'll briefly draw attention to some of those ideas from each of those levels. We move on to the next slide, thank you. A central message from the classroom perspective was that students and teachers wanted more time and space to learn about climate change and environmental sustainability in a way that's not linked to assessment, and encourage students to research and take action in the context of sustainability. Young people and teachers wanted more support for teachers of all subjects so that they were all able to engage in sustainability-focused professional development to develop their confidence and expertise. We see this in the image of a sustainability classroom with views across to the school greenhouse and allotments, opportunities and time for students to work together and to make sustainable choices. If we move on to the school slide, thank you. Teachers and young people wanted to place student voice and agency at the core of school sustainability action, where making the sustainable choice in school was straightforward and where sustainability was considered in all purchasing decisions. Sustainability actions should be tracked and rewarded. Sustainability should feature in school-level decision-making bodies, policies, and there should be a school sustainability lead to lead this work. Teachers and young people called for the link between the quality of the school environment and their mental and physical health to be acknowledged and nurtured. We see this here in the image of a green school environment with, for example, sustainable transport and energy options. And if we move on to the next slide, thank you. Education for environmental sustainability was seen as a community endeavour by teachers and young people. They called for a no-cost, external accredited award for students and teachers, which has an environmental sustainability focus. Both teachers and young people highlighted the value of the collective and how this develops over time. During the workshops with Maisie, this idea was visualised through the example of the acorn, which grows into a sapling, and then into a mature oak tree, and eventually into a forest, a community of sustainability, if you will. Youth and teachers want to see a community sustainability curriculum for groups and parents involved in education, and they want opportunities to identify and value sustainability education undertaken from the early years onwards, and to build on this work through community-based partnerships in both formal and informal settings. Teachers and young people want to see greater awareness of the value of schools as local hubs for sustainability, where people from across the community can take part in and lead education and activities and build their own sustainability networks. This sense of the school as the community sustainability hub is beautifully captured in this illustration, with shared opportunities to work, learn, and live sustainably. And for our final level, the policy solutions. At a policy level, the manifesto calls for a coordinated review involving teachers and students of secondary school curricula across the UK. This will identify ways to foreground and value sustainability, regardless of the subjects that students elect or have to study. Teachers and students would like to work with policymakers to identify the ways that sustainability can feature in existing accountability regimes and policies. They would like to see educational policies which focus on valuing collective, equitable action and positive problem solving. Across all levels, including the classroom, the school, the community, and at policy level, the importance of starting young with sustainability was recognised by us all. As our participants put it, start young and keep going. And on to my final slide, thank you. At this point, I would like to thank on behalf of the whole Research Commission and to extend our huge thanks to all the young people and teachers who've created this compelling and inspiring vision, to Maisie Summer for so beautifully illustrating that vision, and to all our partners and colleagues who've supported this project, especially our funder, BERA. In our ongoing work, we're hosting an online workshop led again by Maisie on the 30th of November as part of the ESRC's Festival of Social Sciences. In this workshop, we'll bring together those with an interest in environmental education to share ideas about how to implement simple ways into everyday practice, both in and beyond schools, and all are very welcome, so do watch out for some more information about that event. The Research Commission is also guest editing an issue of BERA's Research Intelligence with contributions from across the Commission, which will be published early next year. And we're also working hard on research articles focused on the manifesto, which we hope again will be published in the very near future. One of the really beautiful parts of making this manifesto have been the conversations and the connections that have been forged across generations. And now I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Judy Ling Wong, the Honorary President of the Black Environment Network, who will now share her thoughts, ideas and perspectives. Thank you very much.
Good evening to you all. The death of George Floyd in May 2020 has sent a wave of emotion across the world. It has given impetus to actions for diversity, equality, and inclusion. In particular, Black Lives Matter, points to the importance of structure and process, working towards a vital interconnectedness that's essential to the local and global agenda of sustainability. There's 3 themes for working with diversity, equality, and inclusion. They are representation, engagement, and provision. Underpinning these is the principle that affected communities should lead. In developing a manifesto for education for sustainability, young people and teachers are the stars of the show. I have greatly enjoyed working as a team with the BERA Education for Environmental Sustainability Research Commission, identifying actions to ensure diverse presence in the co-creation of the manifesto. The process included outreach work to underpin representation. There was also forerunning work in the development of appropriate outreach materials. Around engagement, a lot of attention was paid to the design of workshops and consultation to ensure that voices were heard. Provocations were prepared to foreground serious themes of environmental sustainability. This was combined with lively, creative, and fun processes, including the involvement of artists. An atmosphere of welcome and openness and the meticulous collection of input led to rich material for consideration. The sensitive use of graphics is one dimension of this exercise, ensuring that cultural and other significant aspects are obviously visible to address inclusion up front. When I speak of the 3rd theme of provision, I'm mindful of the need for a framework of that meets the needs of those we're educating, thinking beyond our wish to switch on the contribution of young people to sustainability. Those that feel cared for are best able to care for others and for the environment. Young people, now and into the future, are shaping the future that is theirs. It is now that we must take action to adequately resource a framework that meets their multifaceted needs, with the needs of teachers as an important facet of provision. We must build their personal sense of potential and confidence, of entitlement to fairness, and nurture their creativity and talents to lay down the foundation for their motivation to act. Black Environment Network continues to pose the challenge that there is no such thing as a purely environmental initiative. A so-called purely environmental initiative is one that has rejected its social, cultural, and economic context. I will expand on 3 key themes: representation, engagement, and provision, now that the manifesto is being launched and we are moving into the phase of stimulating and supporting actions around it. In terms of representation, our young people are asserting that they must be given capabilities such as critical thinking and communication skills so that they may be empowered to voice their concerns effectively. Many of our young people have taken part in school strikes and belong to a very welcome rising generation of young activists. In terms of engagement, young people emphasize love of the environment and love for people as a basis for action, and the importance of using stories to inspire everyone. They assert that knowledge and experience and the resulting actions must not be fragmented or ring-fenced, but integrated. Finally, in terms of provision, our young people are ambitious. Beyond the vision of schools as hubs for sustainability, set within frameworks that include diverse community partnerships, they want endorsement from politicians and social media influencers entering into arenas of power. I look forward to the vibrant manifesto at work in schools and across diverse communities. It will make a vital difference as a co-created and inclusive focus for working with sustainability. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Royal Society of Chemistry. My name's Sarah Robertson, and today I'd like to share some reflections on this wonderful manifesto that we've been hearing about this afternoon. At the same time, I'm going to provide a sneak preview for you of some related research that the RSC's been conducting. So I'm going to pull out some themes from the manifesto, some of which we've heard about already, and relate them to the findings that we've heard about from our communities in relation to chemistry. But first, I did just want to reflect overall. It's wonderful to hear about the manifesto. It's such an important document. And I'd really like to thank Linda, Lizzie, and especially all the young people and the wider education community who have contributed to this. Could you move the slide forward, please? So just to introduce the RSC's role in policy and influencing, we've been developing this work over the past few years, including the reports and programmes shown here on this slide. And you may have heard about some of our work previously around accessibility of chemistry education for everyone, and also some work that we did around the impact of COVID on teacher training. But our most recent project on sustainability in the curriculum has involved surveys with teachers and young people, employers, and those working in higher education. We're currently working to produce our recommendations about how the school chemistry curriculum can and should support the teaching of sustainability and climate change. We want to identify the core ideas in chemistry that are required to understand sustainability and climate change issues, and where these might fit into the curriculum, and also whether qualification routes and pathways support progression into areas where chemistry contributes to the understanding and solving of issues of sustainability and climate change. So the surveys that we've conducted so far included a survey with young people aged 11 to 18 across the UK. And this survey covered a range of topics related to young people's attitudes to sustainability and climate change generally, and also asked them about their views on the teaching they'd received on these topics and their awareness of and interest in future careers options related to climate change and sustainability. We surveyed education professionals in primary, secondary and further education, and that included teachers, technicians and lecturers. And that survey covered views on sustainability and climate change in the current chemistry curriculum, the challenges and barriers to teaching these topics, and the most important knowledge and skills that there are to be taught. And our survey with the wider chemical sciences community included anyone working in the chemical sciences, and that included those working in schools. And we asked about the importance of teaching about sustainability and climate change, the most important knowledge and skills that should be taught, and also views on the current chemistry curriculum and the existence of a green skills gap in the workforce and the future workforce. Next slide, please. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts or your ideas on how you think chemistry can contribute to addressing our global sustainability challenges. So if you could input a word or more than one word, if you like, that would be good to see. Thank you. Okay, so there's important words coming through here around green technologies, carbon, critical underpinnings, the circular economy, hope and solutions, carbon dioxide. Yeah. Well, I think looking at these words coming through really reinforces that chemistry is fundamental in solving some of the world's biggest challenges. And we're particularly looking at the Sustainability Development Goal number 12, which is the responsible consumption and production goal, and also goal 13, which is to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So from energy storage and new renewable fuels to understanding critical raw materials and plastics and their fate in the environment, the knowledge and skills and the innovation that chemists can provide will be critical to the development of new technologies that will help to achieve the world's sustainable development goals. Chemistry is really fundamental to this, and thank you for all those contributions on the slide which really underpin that. So when we're ready, could we move on to the next slide, please? So what I've done in the next couple of slides is just pull out some of the themes, some of the title themes from the manifesto. We heard earlier about capabilities, for example, and then what I've done is just on the left, you've got some of the themes and findings that came out from the recent research that we've done. And on the right, you've got a quote from the surveys that we've conducted. So around the capabilities, in particular, I sort of picked out some of the themes that came through in the manifesto around the knowledge for action and research and innovation, and those were themes that were strongly reflected in our research. So our survey highlighted that the chemistry curriculum must lay the foundation for future citizens to fully participate in efforts to tackle climate change. Everybody is entitled to an excellent chemistry education, whether they go on to pursue a career in the chemical sciences or take their place in society as scientifically literate citizens. Climate change impacts and the actions to avoid them will occur substantially in the lifetime of children at school today. The chemistry curriculum should therefore equip learners with the core ideas in chemistry needed to understand climate change and the scientific and technological developments that impact society. The knowledge and skills gained through chemistry education should support progression into green jobs and further study in the chemical sciences. Move on to the next slide, please. So the classroom solutions section of the manifesto says that teachers of all subjects should be resourced to engage in sustainability-focused professional development to develop their confidence, and also that more sustainable resources and practices should be used both across the curriculum and extra and co-curricular contexts, and that students should be provided with the space and time to learn about climate change and environmental sustainability that's not linked to assessment. And our research also reinforced these points. So we heard that education professionals report a number of barriers to teaching about sustainability and climate change. And those included too much duplication of content within the chemistry curriculum and also between subjects. They reported a lack of time, particularly at GCSE, and also concerns that others see climate change as a controversial topic. And that latter point was of particular concern amongst those working in 16 to 19 education. Young people told us that they see an urgent need for education and information on climate change issues. Just under 2/3 believe that schools, colleges and universities have the greatest role to play, followed by governments and scientific society. We're particularly interested in the areas where there may be a gap between the skills and knowledge that people currently have and what's required for green jobs now and in the future. And that's something we want to explore further. The next slide, please. So in this slide, within the community section and the policy solutions area of the manifesto, there's encouragement to start young and keep going, and to identify and value sustainability education undertaken from the early years onwards, and initiate a coordinated review involving teachers and students of secondary school curricula across the UK. And these themes were reinforced in our research. So, for example, 96% of educators of 5 to 11-year-olds told us that it's very important that the science curriculum contains content directly relating to sustainability and climate change. Education professionals and the wider chemical sciences community want the government to prioritise sustainability and climate change in the chemistry curriculum. 67% responded high priority, which was the highest category, when they were asked about the extent to which government should prioritise sustainability in the chemistry curriculum. Next slide, please. So we need people with the right skills and knowledge to be able to work in green jobs in the chemical sciences. It's incredibly important for all those reasons that you put up onto the slide earlier. Our Workforce Trends and Economic Impact report in 2020 highlighted the role that the UK's chemistry using professionals will play in a diversity of economic sectors that will contribute to and undergo significant change in a low carbon or circular economy future. On my final slide, please. So just to summarise, the RSC's research provides quantitative and qualitative evidence that very much supports the BERA Manifesto. The chemistry curriculum should equip learners with the core ideas in chemistry needed to understand climate change and the scientific and technological developments that impact society. The knowledge and skills gained through chemistry education should support progression into green jobs and further study in the chemical sciences. We will be releasing our report on the 5th of November, which is the youth themed day at COP26 with a panel event. We'll be sharing within that launch the RSC's commitment in this area. And I'll look forward to exploring how we can best support some of the ideas in this manifesto that we're discussing today. So look out for more information, and I hope to see some of you there. Thanks very much, and I will hand over to the next speaker, Jim Knight. Thank you.
Good evening, and what a pleasure it is to follow Sarah, and thank you very much, Sarah, for that. And equally to be able to follow Judy and and Molly, and very much repeat what Sarah said in starting by thanking Lizzie and Linda for leading this work and for all of the people that have contributed to it, because I think it's a really important and significant document as a manifesto that pulls together what a lot of people have been talking about in our little world of climate and education, and pulls out all of the key themes. I think, I'm particularly pleased to see this emphasis on agency and youth action, and that we should be sharing some responsibility and giving an opportunity for young people to be able to lead a lot of this work, partly as a form of learning, but partly as a way of dealing with some of the other issues, which I'll go on to talk about. I very much welcome the emphasis on community and seeing schools very much as not being little islands working by themselves, delivering a bunch of knowledge into empty vessels, but much more about expressions of our community and the future that we want to have for our communities, and that they are part of engaging and leading those communities into the change that we want to see. And clearly really important to see curriculum and what happens in the classroom also as part of that, so that, and amongst other things, if you can get it into the right place in the curriculum, particularly the national curriculum, as I'll go on to talk about again, then you start to then be able to use the accountability system, and Ofsted in particular, which at the moment is such a straitjacket to change. As I think Lizzie was saying earlier, she didn't use that language, but that's how I heard it. So not only using that, getting over the straitjacket problem, but using accountability for good, if you like. Now, my journey with all of this began just over a year ago with my work with an organisation called Purpose, and we started out thinking, well, look, we're just over a year away from COP. What could we do to engage with teachers and education so that we can get schools and young people to be able to do more around this issue? And one of the things that we did was an extended piece of research on a more qualitative basis with a tighter group of educators, with teachers and leaders here in England. Because, frankly, there's a much bigger problem in England than there is in Scotland, Wales, elsewhere in the United Kingdom. And what's reassuring is that they said all the same things that we've heard today, this evening, are coming out in the manifesto. And my assumption had been that, yeah, there's lots we need to do, and Sarah talked about some of these things, lots we need to do around support for teachers through professional development, through training, more we can do in terms of making sense of the resources that are available, more that we can do in terms of helping school leaders use their freedoms over the curriculum and so on. And all of those things are important, and our research showed that they're important. But in the end, what teachers were saying to us was, look, most importantly, you've got to make us feel confident that we've got permission to do this. We really want to do this. Young people really want this to happen, but we're not going to embed sustainability education into what we do across the curriculum unless you see some change at the top. So, and that plays to the curriculum part of what the manifesto is talking about. And as a result of that, I've introduced a private members bill into the Parliament with thanks to some collaboration with SEED, the Sustainability Environment Education Subject Knowledge Association, and Teach the Future, the young people's organisation, and they helped me word a bill which in essence is asking us to add a third aim to the national curriculum in England, to instill an ethos to care for others, to care for oneself, and to care for the natural environment for present and future generations. A core piece of language from the sustainable education movement. Now, the government's response to that has been really disappointing to date. They don't really see the need. They think that there's enough in the science and the geography curriculums, and there's enough freedom otherwise for schools to be able to do this if they want to anyway. I think that's insufficient, and I'm pleased to see essentially that reinforced by the outcomes of what the manifesto has revealed and that work, but also I think what Sarah was just talking about from the RSC. I am interested in looking, my former paymaster Tez, who I was working for up until about a year ago, they have a report, I think today, that that is reporting the launch of this manifesto, but also says that the DfE, the Department for Education, is planning on publishing a sustainability strategy within days, so during COP, to focus on 4 strategic aims: achieving net zero by 2050. Personally think that's a bit late in terms of net zero emissions from our schools, resilience to climate change, improving the environment for future generations, familiar sounding phrase, and ensuring that citizens are connected to nature. So, if those are the 4 aims of a government strategy, that will be really welcome. We'll just have to see what that means in practice and whether or not that gives more freedom to schools. Because in the end, we have to respond positively to the clamour from young people for us across the whole sort of schools ecosystem to do better on this. We heard, I think, earlier on from Molly, some discussion around eco-anxiety. That we have a pandemic of mental health problems amongst young people, partly as a result of the COVID pandemic. The figures are really alarming. Why on earth should we be adding yet another anxiety to that in terms of all of the noise that is in the media right now around climate change, and that sense amongst so many of us, especially amongst young people, that their future is blighted and there's nothing that they can do about it? Why wouldn't we want to give them some agency over that? Why wouldn't we want them to feel like their individual actions matter? They matter individually, they matter in their family, they matter in their school community and with their friends, and then they matter in their wider community, and that we're giving them the tools, not just the knowledge, but the skills and the mindset to be able to do something to show that positive change is possible and that their actions are significant and can deal with the inaction and the negative actions that my generation have bequeathed them. I think it's also equally important, and Sarah mentioned this in respect of RSC, around around green jobs. You know, a child who started school in September this year will leave school in 2035 to, you know, if what we're legislating for in the Parliament is right, to be a largely zero carbon economy, where every job will be a green job. And why wouldn't we right now be educating them with the mindset and the skills and the knowledge to be able to thrive in an environment, in a labour market, in an economy where every job is a green job? And finally, I would say, we kind of know, you know, the science is really clear, the Committee on Climate Change is really clear that 2/3 of all the actions that need to be taken if we're going to meet whatever is agreed at COP26 is going to be general public behavior change, you know, by change by the public, change by business, and so on. What better place to start than the demographic, young people who are most engaged with this, where we have a universal service that can engage them, i.e. schools, where they can then influence parents, grandparents, family, community, in order to start to trigger and drive the behavior change that we know is essential to meet the targets that we have in order to make the future of those very same young people possible for them to be able to thrive in a sustainable planet. So it's compelling. I really hope the manifesto is listened to. I think it's really important. Congratulations to everyone who's done it. It's not just about government. I think school leaders can do quite a lot now with their autonomy, with the freedoms that they have. Use some of that, grab the agency. There are some great school leaders who are doing it. But if we want this to happen at scale, then we need this manifesto to properly land, and we need ministers who will listen. Thank you very much. So, well, I appear, yeah, others are joining me, good. I think we're having questions now.
Thank you.
Lizzie,
yes, sorry,
are you going to help us?
Yeah, I am going to help you. It just took me a second to unmute. So we have some questions on the Slido, some comments. We haven't got a huge amount of time, but there was a question, I think, for anyone on the panel around how we can move beyond knowledge and understanding towards action and outcomes. How can we achieve that? If that's what young people are asking for in this manifesto, what are some of the ways that we can achieve that going forward? Sorry, that's a slightly big question, but maybe Sarah or Jim, if you want to, or Judy, if you want to share your thoughts.
I mean, I'm happy to start off, get the ball rolling. I mean, I can really only speak from the perspective of a scientific organisation, a professional body, as the RSC is. And I think there's several things that we can do. One is about communicating clearly and consistently about the scientific basis for climate change. Also about influencing policymakers. We have a role to play in there, and we do we have some ability to do that and some success in doing that. Supporting educators and schools, and that teacher CPD support, we can help with providing that. And finally, support for young people in exploring their career options and helping teachers and others to make the links between the curriculum and roles and careers that students might want to go into. So that's from an RSC perspective. Thanks.
Lizzie, I would say, you know, while we're waiting for government ministers, or to find some government ministers who want to listen and want to do something, I think there is a need for more coherence and for it to be easier for school leaders and teachers to be able to know what best practice is and what others that are doing this really well looks like. There is a plethora of wonderful support and resource out there, but it's quite confusing. And one of the things I'm interested in helping with, if anyone's interested, after COP, is seeing if we can convene all of these interested organizations together who are producing all of this stuff and find ways of packaging it so that the many school leaders and teachers who really want to do more and use whatever freedoms they've got, so that it's easier for them to do so.
Well, yeah, that sounds an absolutely fantastic thing to look forward to after COP. Thank you. Judy, I wondered if you wanted to say anything about the positive, the hope, the kind of the joy in the manifesto, and how that can be used as a way to encourage action and outcomes.
I think that in a crisis especially, we need to be very mindful that the two strands of inspiration and practical action to avert negative outcomes goes together. Young people especially need to feel their own power and the enjoyment of the use of it. So people-centered policy is one dimension that we want to see at the very top. And at the very community-based side, we want to have stories that young people identify with and actions they can do within their own lives that makes a difference and therefore stimulates and encourages them to do more. You know, there are things that government can do, but there are also things that government cannot do and are absolutely huge. For example, choosing eating less meat is one dimension that we have now come to see that is very important. And then food waste, it's only something that only individuals can do in their homes and so on. And graphically, the presentation has to be very clear and very impactful. So the graphics in the manifesto is wonderful, but graphics for everything. For example, the issue of food waste, a very interesting graphic that I saw actually composed itself on the basis that food waste is seen as a country. And when you make graphically food waste as a country, it's the third largest country in the world. So you can see the impact of emissions from food waste as well. And we as individuals and families and community have a huge role to play. So it's a combination of sense of power at our own level in our own lives, combined with our absolute adamant pressure on government to make the changes that only government and international nations can come together to do. Then we have that joy and optimism of moving into the future.
Thank you, Judy. I knew I could rely on you to bring us together with such a positive and forward-moving note. We are going to have to wrap this up now. I know we have lots and lots of questions coming in, and but we're going to have an opportunity in the next part of our session to do some networking. So I hope that you're able to join us. My colleagues in BERA, I hope, will help us move from one space to another. So right, check your emails is the note. So if you want to join us for that networking bit, there will be a link to that. As I finish on bang on 6 o'clock, I just want to thank every one of our speakers for their vision, for their enthusiasm, and for helping us share this manifesto at the launch event tonight. We're ever so grateful. So on behalf of Linda, myself, and the whole Research Commission, thank you ever so much. And we look forward to hearing your responses and your engagement with the manifesto in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.